In today's video, we're going to talk more about Deneb, the low-code way to make custom visuals with Power BI. I'm still geeking out about it, so I'm still going to talk about it. Today, I'm going to do a demo build of a Gantt chart, and whether you need a Gantt chart or not, hopefully some of the tips I'll share throughout will be helpful to you as you build other kinds of charts. There's a number of other Gantt charts that already exist out in AppSource, so I encourage you to check those out. From what I've seen in the community, many people have success with those, but some people get confused or run into limitations with those. So maybe the chart we'll build today will help meet your needs. But if not, again, hopefully you'll pick up some good things to make your own charts in Deneb. I've talked before about Deneb and how awesome it is to make very custom and more complex visuals. You can do most of the same things with Charticulator. There are some things you can do in one but not the other. And while I'm building the Gantt chart today, some of the things I hope to show you are how to format the labels on your axis, in this case dates, to set up a condition. In this case, I'll use it for whether or not to show the grid at certain dates. How to change the grid line so that they show up between your values on a categorical axis versus in the middle of them, which comes in handy. And then also we're going to add a today line to this Gantt chart. And as always, or frequently, I like to add the pan zoom feature, which is just a few lines of code and adds some really nice functionality. Again, if you're picking up tips from these videos, please subscribe and stay up to date on the latest ones. So I'm not going to go through the Charticulator version today, but again, these are fairly plain. I'm mostly about function over form, so just like to show people how to build and then let them fine tune them to make them look much nicer. But this can be done with Charticulator as well. If you want to see me walk through a Charticulator version, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to record that. But today we're going to build this Deneb version. And again, it's not the prettiest thing, but hopefully you can see it's got some nice elements to it, and with a little bit of refinement, it could look really, really good. So this one, I've just set up some dummy data with 3 tasks each, six projects here selected, and you can see the grid lines are between the values. Usually by start, they go right over your values, which is not convenient. I've set it up so it's got the pan zoom feature, so you can just do this with the mouse, scroll to zoom in or out, and then drag to get the pan zoom. I've set it up so that the grid lines only show at the start of each year in January, so it's not as cluttered. And I also added a today line here, as that's often a nice feature to see in a Gantt chart. This is what the demo data look like. I've just got project task and a start and an end date. You could also do this with a start date and a duration. So you could either pre-calculate a measure to calculate the end date and bring it in, or you could do it in the visual, but I'm not going to show that today, but it would be doable. All right, so let's start out and build this visual. So I've got the same thing set up here, the same table. Those same fields are in the visual here. And so I'm going to go in and edit the spec. And when you first start out, I had previously did a practice run of this, so I deleted what's there. So it's more complete than this when you start. But I'm just going to go ahead, and the first thing you usually add is a mark. You can just do this if you want. And forgot my comma up here. I see the little red X down there in the lower right. When it disappears, I know I've got my syntax. I like to hit this wrench here to format it and apply it. And so I've just got a simple bar here, and I haven't encoded it, so it doesn't know, where to put it. All of my rows of data are overlapping each other, and it appears as a single bar. I usually use the sort of extended format of this to just do type bar, because I usually end up adding other properties, so you get the same thing. And so now let's add some encoding and start making this look like a Gantt chart. And so I'm going to add encoding. open my curly brackets, and first I'll do the X, and I'll do the field, and then the IntelliSense kicks in. I'll use my start date column. I need to tell it it's a date column, so I'm going to use temporal as the syntax in Vega Lite. Close my parentheses, my red X goes away, hit apply, and now I've got stuff encoded along the X-axis. Still not very useful yet. I need to have my Y-axis as well, so we'll do that one to the project field. Again, the IntelliSense tab, select that. And this is a type nominal, or which is just means categorical. Close that. What am I missing? It says my error's on line 12. I must have put in an extra curly bracket. Okay, and so now, okay, that's a little better, but that doesn't look like a Gantt chart yet. So there's another property, another encoding you can use to specify the end of your field. And so I will do the X2 value to the end date. I don't think I need to apply a type because it's going to use the one, the temporal axis that's already defined for the X-axis. That's starting to look a little better. There's a couple different ways you can make a Gantt chart. I'll start out with the simpler one, and you could actually have your bars overlapping. So what I might do there is just decrease the opacity of these, and I'll just put 0.6 for now to reduce those so that you can actually see where things overlap. I probably wouldn't build it this way, but it is an option if you're really trying to save space. And then the other thing we can do is to color our tasks. We'll also encode the color also off of the task field. Okay, and I probably should put that as nominal, but it seems that it accepted that as the default, so it worked. All right, so that could be one way to go, but traditionally you see your tasks offset, and so there is a new, relatively new feature in Vega Lite where you can actually specify an X offset or a Y offset. And so in this case, I'm going to use the Y offset, and I'm going to also put the task field here. Close that out. And you see it automatically moves stuff. It staggers stuff on the Y-axis. So that's a really nice feature and really helps you quickly make, whether it's you can have an X offset and do clustered column charts, etc. So it adds a lot of flexibility. All right. So next, what we're going to do is let's just pretty this up a little bit. We don't need these axis titles, so those are axis properties. So you have to put axis here and then make sort of a sub object underneath the X and the Y, and then I can just say the title, and it's either null or false usually to turn it off. Looks like it accepted null. Sometimes if you did false, it would it doesn't give you an error here, it just gives you a warning. And so basically the yellow triangles means your syntax may be fine, but you've used a property or put a value in there that isn't consistent with the schema. So I'll go back to null, and I've turned off the X-axis one. I'll copy that and do the same thing on the Y-axis. All right, I've turned that off. That's good. All right. At this point, I'll go ahead and add the pan zoom feature, which I really like. And I have some code up on a different screen, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy that over. It isn't much code at all, but it has a big impact on the functionality of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring that in up here. It will work in other places as well. And I'm going to go ahead and accept this. And this gives us this functionality here where I'm just scrolling the mouse to zoom in and out. And once I'm zoomed in, I can drag with the mouse to get this this panning feature. And you know, a Gantt chart's a good excuse to use that feature. And it's just a few lines of code, and basically you're binding, you know, this selection, which would be your mouse actions of the interval that you're selecting, and binding that to the scale. So you're automatically changing the scales of your chart based on what you're doing with the mouse. I don't understand it more than that, but I understand enough to copy and paste it in there and enjoy the functionality. All right. So now I want to do a couple things. Let's I want to specify the height of these things. Like right now, this looks good with 5 projects selected, but I may change slicer values and have many more or many less. So I'm just going to go ahead and specify a height. And you can specify an overall height, like I could say 500, you know, for example, and it would, you know, make the chart that size. But when you are going to have a variable number of, in this case, y-axis values, it's better to use the step. And so I'm going to use a step, and I think a value of 20 will probably be good there. And I'll apply that. And so now when I change slicers, whether I'm looking at 1 project or 50 projects, they're all going to be, each of these bars is going to be the same height, right? And that's, I think, will be a better user experience than having 1 project that fills up this whole space, or having 50 projects that are all squeezed into this space. Okay, so now let's do some stuff with the grid lines. This is kind of busy. I'd like to have a line between each of my projects to separate them. And I'd like to remove some of the clutter here with these vertical grid lines. So let's go ahead and first get rid of the vertical grid lines. And that's another axis property. So I'll just say grid, and I'll just say false. And oh, sorry, that's the y. That's the y ones. So I will do the same thing on the x-axis, and they disappear. And I actually do want the y ones, and if I just do this, you'll see they show up, you know, right even with my values here, and I don't want that. And so there is another setting where you can do, and it's called the tick band, and the option you want there is called extent. And when I select that, you'll see that the lines between the values, it moves in between them, which is what I want. All right, and of course we could change the properties to make it thicker, darker, whatever, but I'm just going to leave it like that for now. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to format these labels. And so this works pretty good, and maybe you won't need to change this, but in case you do, I wanted to show this feature. So right now it puts the whole month in between for the year, and then when it crosses the year, it puts the year value. I'd like to have it more consistent across the bottom. And so for the x-axis, I'm going to add a format property. And this has some different syntax. It's the D3 syntax. And if I jump over to this website, and I'll put this link in the description, you can see, so it's easy to figure out what you need. But there's these symbols here, percent whatever, to get, you know, either the full month or partial month or day or, you know, hour, second, whatever. You can look through this, and again, I'll provide the link to it, but it's just the D3 syntax. And from playing around with it before, I know the one I need is %B, %Y. And then if I apply that, you'll see I get the short version of the name plus the last 2 digits of the year. right? And so now I get this kind of feature, and then whether I zoom in or out, it keeps that approach. If I zoom in too far, I start to see multiple ticks per month, and so maybe this wouldn't be the best option for if you're going to really zoom in or if you had a really narrow time range. But for this, I think it works well. All right, so now what I'd like to do is add grid lines, but only each time it changes year. Okay, and so this is going to require using the condition syntax. And there's a few flavors of this, and I certainly haven't mastered it, but I'll show you one way to accomplish that. And again, if you just search Vega Lite and conditions, you'll find lots of examples out there where people have added conditions. All right, so in this case, I do want a grid for along the x-axis. So I'll put that back. Well, that's too busy. Now it turns out I wasn't able to put a condition on the grid property where I'd say, hey, if it's January, then true, otherwise false. But here's I guess a hack you could use is to use grid opacity, where I was able to add a condition, right? And the syntax is as follows. And again, there's other ways to do this too. I'm going to do a condition, and then I'm going to do a test, and then I'm looking at my text on the other screen here, and I'm going to check the field, and the label value is sitting there apparently in a field called value, and then I'm going to aggregate it to the month level. I'm going to make it a month, and then I'm going to check if it is equal to 1. Okay, and so that's the test. And then you provide the value if it's true. And so I'll give it a value of 1, then close curlies, and then here's the value if false. So it's a little bit different syntax, not really intuitive. So definitely this is the kind of thing you would want to copy from online and adapt. Okay, so then if I apply that, you'll see that I only see these lines at the Januaries, which is what I was looking for. But again, I'd like to make it look a little different. So I could do, the grid color. It defaults to a light gray, so I'm going to make it black. And then I'll do I want it to be a dashed line. And I can apply an array here, and I want it to be a 4 dash, which is sort of on-off kind of thing. And then I can also maybe make it a little bigger here. I think it's the width, and I'll make it a 2. Okay, so again, that's the basic kind of functionality there. All right, next we need to add the text labels to the tasks. I forgot one other thing too. I kind of wanted these to be curved a little bit. So up here in the mark settings for the bar, there's a corner radius setting, and I think I did 15 before, and that just adds some curvature to those. All right, so now if I want to add a text label to this, then I'm talking layers, right? As soon as you want to add more than one mark, then you're typically layering stuff on top of each other. And a good way to do layering is to keep sort of a separate encoding section for the properties they have in common, and then specifying encoding along with each mark. And so I'll show you what I mean by that. So what I typically do is I'll start a layer, and layers provide arrays of mark and encoding properties, or mini specs in Vega Lite speak. And so I'm going to, I need a square bracket to start an array, a curly bracket to start the first mark, and then I'm going to go ahead and close the curly brackets and close the square brackets. And I look to make sure my red X goes away, And if I apply this, I should get the same chart. So I have a layer, one single layer, but this helps me know that I have the syntax correct. All right, and now what I'm going to do is layer a text on top of the mark. And I already know from before that I don't want all the same encoding to apply to the text mark as the bar mark. So the one that I don't want applied to the text is the color one. So I'm going to go ahead and Control X and take the color encoding out, and I'm actually going to add that inside the layer with the mark. So it's going to get its own encoding section. Open curly brackets, paste what I had before, and then close curly brackets. Okay, so at this point I should still have the same chart, and I do. And now I'm going to go ahead and layer the text there. And so what I could do is, just to help me save a little typing, I can Control C that, and I'm basically just adding another similar section below it. And in this case, I want to do text. These properties don't apply to text, all right, but I'll have different ones. And in this case, I want the text encoding to be off of also the task field. Okay, so if I go ahead and apply that, you see that didn't work. And what I learned earlier was what I had done with the pan and zoom needed to be just in the layer with the bar chart. So I'm actually going to take that out of there, get rid of this extra comma, and I'm going to put that inside the layer with the bar. My syntax looks like it's all right, so I'm going to go ahead and format it. And I get stuff back here. I still have my pan and zoom, and I have this text label in here now, and now I just need to place it better. And so what I can do is I'll set like an align property of left. See how that looks? A little better. And I just want to nudge it a little more to the right. So I will go ahead and put the dx property, which is an offset property for that, and I'll try 15. Okay, so that's better. And so again, I start at the beginning of the bar so that if I happen to have a long task name, I've got plenty of space for it. And again, you could do all sorts of other formatting here in the mark properties for the text, the size, the color, all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to leave that there for now and move on to, I think, the last element, which is adding the today line, which was a little more involved, but I'll walk through it. All right, and so for this one, from a little bit of trial and error, I realized I had to do yet another layer. So I'm actually going to layer something else on top of this layer of 2 marks. And so what I'm going to do is I'll actually just collapse these here. And I'm just going to, what you want when you come to constant lines is called, the mark type is called a rule. And if you search on Vegalite, you'll see the rule there. So I'm going to actually do a layer. So, I mean, this just really shows the power of this and the flexibility. So I'm going to do another layer, square brackets, curly brackets, get rid of those. This is the first part of the layer, right? And so I'm going to close the curly brackets there, and then I'm going to have another one where I'm going to start curly brackets, and then I'll have a mark. In this case, I'm going to have a type of, the type is rule. I think I want the color to be red, and then size, I think, is 3. All right, now I want this rule, this vertical line, to be at today's date value. So I need to get that somehow. So to do that, I can actually add data or calculate something inside the visual. So inside this same spec here, I'll just do it at the top. I'm going to add a transform, And for just to keep this video shorter, I'm just going to go ahead and copy some of the text in here, and I'll explain it. All right, so this is a transform, and so basically I'm adding a calculated column, to use Power BI speak, inside the visual, and there's this now function similar to the Power BI now, the DAX now, and so I'm going to calculate now, and I'm going to add that column, and I'm going to give it this name, and I just called it now underscore field, right, to avoid having a space in there. All right, and so now I've done that, and so now that this column exists, I've got my mark. I can actually encode that mark to use that new field. Okay, so now if I do X encoding, with the field, and see it shows up in the IntelliSense, which is always a good sign. That's a type, also type temporal. And I'll close that, close the encoding, and probably, this is always a little bit of trial and error here to get the, I'm going to close my square brackets. Maybe I needed one more curly. There we go. My red X goes away, so I'm good to format it. And now my today line shows up. And so whether I zoom and move around, it all shows up there. All right. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. Again, this is not the prettiest Gantt chart, but hopefully you can see the potential of it, and you could customize this much further to make it look really nice. And then you could also save this as a template so that you could reuse it or share it with others or share it with the community. I have a separate video. For example, let me just show this one thing. Right now I have this filtered to 5 projects. If I clear the filter on that, you see it goes to a lot of projects, and you'll see you can scroll here. So if I scroll in the middle, I get my pan or my zoom effect. If I go over here and scroll, I can get there, but notice I lost my legend, and then I don't see my x-axis until the end. And so these dotted lines help orient you, but it's not ideal. So I have a separate video on how to add a parameter here and add a slider here that serves as a scroll bar, but it's effectively filtering the visual to only show a certain number there. So again, hopefully this helps you. If you want to see the charticulator version of this, let me know in the comments, but otherwise please subscribe, and I've got more Deneb videos planned. Thank you.